From yoga. Man, this is a bad choice of backlight. I'm talking about the process today. The process is a way of tapping into social intuition. So skip ahead if you're catching the recording or whatever. Actually, we're probably going to get started pretty much right away. I mean, as people join, that's what happens. I'll give a little backdrop. Yogi Chris, so I've lived with AZD for 4 years, a little over 4 years. I studied with AZD for about 9 years or so, 9.5 years. And it's been such a journey. I used to do a lot of psychedelics before I met AZD. Did a few times after I met AZD, but lately none. And and lately I mean like the last several years. But it's definitely tapped into that psychedelic experience. It's a trip to be able to command your imagination to, I don't even want to say manifesting. It makes it sound so flowery. It's just change your state of mind so that your delivery changes, what you talk about changes, like everything changes. Your body language changes. Like when you get control of your imagination, and your imagination is coming out in all kinds of weird ways, like worries and doubts, and pretty much everything you think about, you're imagining. Like that's what imagination is, and you're just not in control of it. Like it's your engine, your machine is thinking on its own. You're not really thinking; it's thinking you basically. And AZD has techniques that he has shared that take control of your imagination, and man, I'm telling you, it's just like a physical warm up. Like when you start warming up your body to do some exercise or something, you don't automatically feel warmed up just when you start. Like that's what the point of the warm up is. It takes like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like. But at some point, you'll hit this tipping point where you feel warmed up. Like your body just it takes on a new level of awareness. It wakes up a little bit more. At the top levels for like really star athletes, their warm up looks like a whole workout in itself. For 45 minutes, they're like watch an NBA player or anybody, an Olympian or anything, prepare to compete. Their warm up might as well be a full workout for a regular person, even beyond. They're pushing hard. And then they cool down a little bit, but then they're warm. And it's like that when you're at the top of the world in your social dynamics. AZD is number one on the planet. And so we're his training team, we're his wingmen. We got to come up with him also. We can't just stay at the same level, so we got to improve. And part of that was learning to change your state of being so that you are ready. That so much of his game is readiness. You got to be ready to respond. Some people may call it like witty or whatever. Witty is like you respond in a certain way sharply because you have it worked out, or you could be witty without being present. You could be witty without necessarily even being ready. It's a big overlap, so wittiness comes with readiness, but it's really readiness that we want. Readiness. Witty, right, is not always the response that you want in social dynamics. But readiness, and readiness doesn't mean jumpy either. Like ready to jump the gun, like you're trigger happy or whatever. That's also a kind of readiness, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's a presence and it's a willingness to communicate. It's an ability to communicate. Sometimes we get emotional in a situation where we're not really able to voice what's going on and a lot of times in social dynamics, it's not the right time to voice what's going on in us. That's where real self mastery is needed because there are proper or respectful or whatever responses for the situation that may not be literally what you're experiencing inside. For an example, you may get offended in a situation, but you're around the girl and all of her friends, and it's not the time to point out that you're offended. First of all, you shouldn't be getting offended, but if something happens subconsciously, you're not in control, you get offended by something, there's a way to navigate that situation which is honest with yourself, but doesn't is not so literally honest that you're voicing I got offended by you saying that, because that's not the proper thing to do in social dynamics. So your ability to be aware of what's going on inside and your ability to know the context of what's going on outside, that's a social intuition. In my personal definition, I mean, you could take it to the fucking dictionary or whatever. Ask somebody else, they'll give you a different definition. But to know the lay of the land and how to navigate you men, women, old, young, rich, poor, my tribe, not my tribe, the girl I'm going for, the girl I'm not going for, my girlfriend versus some other girl versus somebody I don't even like the whole lay of the land, the social dynamics of the venue or the area you're in. Okay, that's one. Now you also need awareness of what's going on inside, the inner landscape. What are you feeling? Not in an emotionally reactive way, but in a sense that you have feelings going on inside of you and you must be aware of them or they're controlling you. Doesn't mean you have to voice them, but you got to be aware. Otherwise, you're going to be speaking out of your emotions because that's what happens. You get angry, you sound angry. You feel sad, you sound sad. You feel bored, you sound bored. Like the sound is just now. If you have some self control and awareness, then you can manipulate your sound, and maybe the untrained ear won't hear it, and that's kind of what you need if you're going to navigate situations that you don't feel 100%, but you gotta be on top of your game. At the highest levels game, you even find a way to voice how you're feeling literally, but you say it in such a poetic way. It's literal, but it's poetic. What do I mean by that? It might be cloaked in metaphors or imagery, but to anyone with the ears to hear that's actually listening to what you say, they'll be able to discern and decipher what it is you're saying, which is I feel sad or I feel angry or feel upset or whatever. It could be something as simple as I've grown so much today, I've handled obstacle after obstacle and come out on top, etc., etc. Okay, you may be feeling good about it, and that doesn't lie. But you also, anybody listening might hear, oh man, that must have been frustrating. You overcame a lot of frustrations. He might not be frustrated in that moment, but you can empathize that the person probably went through a bunch of frustration. So the ability to navigate the social ocean, the winds may be blowing in all kinds of directions, but you got to go that way. That's the girl you want to go for. Part of going for that girl may be not directly going for that girl. That may put her off. She may be surrounded, again, like guys and girlfriends or whatever. It might not be the situation to go right for her. But warming up the whole area so that the guys and girls in the area, they respect you, they like you. It's not about trying to win them over because some people may not like you. It's about developing your standards and your conduct so that you have high value conduct. So that you naturally are expressing leader of men, pre-selection, and all these things. Otherwise, you're just faking it. And you can fake it till you make it, but ultimately, so that you make it. You're faking it so that you feel the responses from the environment, and you're like, oh, this is way better than, me just being myself. When I was just myself, I wouldn't get positive responses. So you learn some new ways of conducting yourself that get better responses, and then most sane individuals, when you present them with a better way of being, and they perceive that it's better to be this way, they will change themselves. They'll voluntarily change themselves. You don't have to try to change people. Maybe there's some convincing, or maybe there's a presentation of the information, if you don't like the word convincing. But there is some way that we display a better way of being. And then the person will change themselves. Now, they may have obstacles. A lot of those are going to be wrong ideas. Guys will have wrong ideas about what's being said or did, and that will prevent them from changing because then they'll start judging it as lower value. For example, somebody may find it detestable that the teacher would curse them out. I can't hear what the teacher is saying anymore because the teacher should never curse me out. Well, you've probably never excelled at anything ever underneath a teacher, and definitely not at the highest levels. And the highest levels would probably be in the spiritual practices where a person is a spiritual teacher. It might also be in the assassin practices, because to be an assassin training under a mentor, the mentor is essentially giving you secrets that, you can get around defenses, you can get by people, you can get to... You're very, very, very dangerous to be trained as an assassin. And similar with spiritual truths, because when you have spiritual truths, for example, if you ever bring God into the conversation when it comes to correcting your woman, it's a very potent argument. You start really imbuing what you're saying with some power when you start invoking God. Now, if you do that unrighteously, like you're a hypocrite, and you say you shouldn't be so lustful or something, or you shouldn't lie because of God sees all your thoughts, and then sometime later, that day, the next day, next week, next month, whatever, you don't say something out of fear, and then you're like, well, I was just afraid of the consequences or whatever. And it's like, well, a man of God wouldn't do that. It gets thrown in your face. It'll hurt you a lot more. If you start claiming righteousness, but you're not acting righteous, but you use righteousness to correct the girl, that's going to bite you in the ass really hard. And that's an example of, whatever that was an example of, using God to influence the situation. Now, when you use spirituality, when you start to understand true spiritual truths, your influence becomes much more potent. You have more certainty in your voice and conviction, and a pastor. That's arguably one of the most compelling speakers on earth. It's going to be like a pastor, preacher, something like that. The person that stands on stage and to a congregation of people talks about God. The other one might be a pimp or a politician. You know, politicians got to sway a lot of people. Pimp doesn't sway a lot of people, but man, does he get a woman to do something that you or I would probably never get a woman to do. Maybe because we don't have that level of ethics, but at the same time, even if somebody, let's say somebody was just going to pay $5 million to convince a woman to sell her pussy, and she wasn't actually going to sell her pussy. The $5 million was just going to be if you convince her. You got to convince her so that she starts walking the streets selling her pussy, and then it turns out it's a game show, and they're like, just kidding. You give the woman $1 million so she never sells her pussy, and you make $4 million. Like if somebody tried to pay you a bunch of money to actually go out and convince a woman to slut herself, sell it, good luck. You probably don't have the ability to do that, to make it happen. And you can't tell her, if you do this, I'll give you $1 million. Like you actually have to talk her into it somehow. And then you would see the persuasive ability of a pimp, a legit pimp, not one that just backhands her and pumps her with meth. And, you know, that's not what I'm talking about. There are pimps who just talk them into it. And yeah, they entice them, I'll buy you this or that or whatever. But somehow it works. I mean, the pimp's pimping, so he must be making more money than he's spending if he's succeeding at it in whatever level of success you consider that success. So the politician obviously sways people in 1,000 different ways. And the truth is easy to sway people. That's why certain politicians don't really have to try very hard. And the people get behind them. Because the businessmen, they've succeeded. They sway people with their character. They don't have to use a bunch of fancy words. And then there'd be other politicians that are using all kinds of word wizardry to convince people. You need to be tapped in to a level of survival instinct that triggers in you a truth and honesty that a wild animal would have. Like you can't fool a dangerous pit bull into you're a safe person. Like you actually have to conduct yourself around the pit bull like you're not a threat. You can't just say that you're not a threat, but be acting with body language and everything that you are a threat. So people get hypnotized. Hold on, write this down. People are hypnotized in the social dynamic. They're hypnotized by value. They're hypnotized by beauty, which is a kind of value. They get hypnotized by all the loud sounds and the rhythmic movements if they're bobbing their head to the music or whatever. Let me close this more. It's too glary. There. Still kind of dark, but you guys see. So to tap into a survival value, because I don't know the last time I heard or saw of an animal being hypnotized, especially a wild animal. You know, I guess there's an example of like a shark where they rub its belly or something and it kind of rolls over, falls asleep. Okay, I guess, you know, there's a nerve reflex there. But as far as like talking to an animal and talking it into like kind of going into a trance, you know, where you can insert suggestions where it's like every time I touch my shirt, you sit. And then that would be a cool experiment. Maybe at some point in the future, like dogs will learn enough language that we can do that. But basically, the animal isn't going to understand language like that. You can't insert a command into an animal's brain so that later when you touch your tie, the dog sits down. I don't think they understand language that well. But people get hypnotized. They get hypnotized by weird conversations. They get hypnotized throughout their day. Like you're just living your day, you get hypnotized by just the repetitiveness of what you're doing. You go unconscious. And that happens out in the social venue. Put a pretty girl in front of you. Jesus, let her give you some indications of interest where she likes you or whatever, and you just go into a trance. You got to be able to snap out and tap into the survival instinct that would be a tiger, a lion, a wolf, a bear, a shark, a beast of some sort, an elephant, even if it's an ant or something like that. There's some impulse for survival at a deep level that supersedes or it undercuts somehow the trance. Society trances you. Your day job trances you. The music or the things on TV that it trances you. Like staying conscious and aware is the game that we play. Because if you learn any kind of game but you're not present, then you're really just fooling people into your survival value. Because a person in a trance is not survival value. You know? A trance person is a liability. Because in a trance, a person is responding unconsciously to things. And if they're responding unconsciously, then how can you really trust how that person is going to conduct themselves? You know what I mean? If the person is under a trance where every time you touch your tie, they take off their coat, then how can you trust that person? They're around me. I touch my tie. They take off their coat. You don't know why. That's a Manchurian candidate in the workings, where you could just make an assassin or make someone that's going to do something stupid and blow themselves up or something. That's not as extreme as people are, but that is the same mechanism that's taking place in people. They're in a trance. You can't trust a person in a trance. You only can trust a person who is present. And even then, are you going to now you can trust anybody you want to trust because you're so strong and nobody can hurt you, and so there's no reason to be distrustful of people because you're invincible to them. Okay? But I'm talking on a social dynamics level. If a person is hypnotized, you can't trust how they're going to conduct themselves socially. They'll do weird shit. A person who's present may do a weird thing, but then immediately be present that they did a weird thing because they'll be present with it. At the very least, they'll notice, because they're present, that someone else got weirded out about it. And social dynamics, you don't want to offend people. That's not part of the game. You win over the environment, which is all the people in it, by not offending people. Now, maybe you offend one or two people along the way, so hopefully you've built up value in so many people around in the venue that one or two people, maybe they get offended by everything. Maybe the people that work there are like, that person gets offended by everything. But if you only interact with a couple people in a venue and you offend one or two of them, you're out. The other people in the venue aren't going to give you a chance. So you definitely don't want to lead off with offending people. And it shouldn't be your strategy to offend people unless a person's been unjust and, violated you or your group or something. And even then you may not want to. There will be some threshold where it's like you got to get the person back because otherwise socially you're weak. And that would harm your group more than not. People will put you in situations where they test your authority and power, and if you don't respond, then more problems are coming. More tests are coming. It's essentially the bully syndrome. If somebody's bullying you, you got to handle that. It doesn't mean get offended. It just means handle it. And how you handle it, there's going to be any number of different ways you could do it depending on what they say and do. But the way to handle anything is tapping into your social intuition, which also means tapping into your survival instinct and your social awareness. Your survival instinct is that thing that will not let you lose. You will keep overcoming over and over and over again, no matter what. If you don't have that survival instinct, you have the opposite, you have the succumbing instinct, then everything that happens you get offended by and you find a reason to close off and withdraw from it. That's the opposite of survival instinct. So how do you tap into your survival instinct? Well, these are some of the things that I'll be sharing. In 2 days, I'm giving a lecture on the tap-in process, AZD's tap-in process, and how I use it also tapping in with business. I'm the most successful businessman in IMC Nation as far as IMC business is concerned. There are more successful businessmen, but they're doing other business. Arguably, I'm more successful because I'm doing exactly what I want to do. For example, they may be doing what they want to do, but they're not doing IMC business. They got to make money doing something else so that they can come here and afford IMC business. They afford IMC offerings or the AZD's teachings and whatnot. I afford AZD's teachings by selling AZD's teachings. By distributing AZD teachings, I get myself AZD teachings. I'm fully aligned. My business, my money comes in to afford more of what I'm selling. To sell it, to afford more of what I'm selling. So other people, they got to make their money outside, come here and spend it. I make my money inside and spend it here. So my money is recirculating inside. And until I'm overtaken, I'm the best at that, next to AZD. So it's not because nobody else is trying. A bunch of people are trying. They may even one day overtake me. Who knows? But for years and years now, I've been number one. And there's reasons for that. And that has to do with a mindset about approaching how you approach your business. Why have I been able to pull in $2.5 million for AZD in 5 years? How's that possible? When the next highest guy is like tens of thousands maybe. I'm just like orders of magnitude ahead. I've been at it longer. Not that much longer. Okay. By the time they've been in it, I had done much more. Yeah, but you got all the low-hanging fruit. Yeah, but I didn't have me helping me along the way. They had me helping them. Giving them systems, scripts, content, organizing shit, advice, doing a lot of the back-end stuff. All they have to do is sell. I have to sell and do the back-end stuff. So How do I handle all of that pressure? How do I process so many communications throughout the day where I'm hearing no, I'm getting dodged, I'm getting negative communications? What do I do? Like the process is important for that. Having techniques to change your state of mind is essential if you're going to have some kind of occupation that you're persistent at and has you interacting with lots of people all the time. If you don't process your prior interactions, you carry those interactions into your next interactions. And you should never treat person B like person A or person C like person B or D or A. Like you treat them just like they are, who they are. Even if they're doing something similar to another person you've interacted with, you don't treat two people the same at the highest levels. I mean, it gets by in a general sense. Like you could treat women like that, you could treat men like that. But when it comes to actually having a relationship with someone, which is what business is, like that's why I take it so personal when guys, when on my business communication lines, they don't take it serious or they, jerk off with it or whatever. After long enough in the game and communicating with enough people, I know what sincere interest looks like. I'm interested in helping the guy that's interested. I'm not interested in helping the guy that is expressing disinterest. And if somebody's leading me on, then whatever. Like you get all kinds of miscommunications. It's the same thing with girls. We go out almost every night. We get tons of miscommunications from girls. They're not polite. They're not nice. We might be going to strip clubs, but to be honest, they're usually more polite than regular girls because they're actually trying to get money out of you. So you go to a regular club, like the girls there are ruder still. At the end of the day, the stripper's probably ruder because, I mean, she's just got to be a shark in a way that other girls on the outside don't anyway. But how you accumulate those as the guy throughout the night, all kinds of miscommunications. It might even be your friend that miscommunicates with you. Like, at the end of the day, if you just go to sleep with all that miscommunication in you, it'll fuck you up. It'll fuck up your sleep. Knowing many things, knowing how to process that miscommunication, that's part of the process. That's the lecture I'm giving in 2 days under AZD's guidance. How to navigate the situation when it's happening, getting in state. You must be in state to handle the situation. Because that's huge. You're going to make all kinds of mistakes in your communicating. Because that's like the software program. Like you got to learn the right moves. And when you go against better opponents, your moves are kind of obsolete. Like they already know that move, so they predict it better. So then you got to add on more refinements. That's just what happens as you get higher and higher level. You got to get more refined and sophisticated with your moves. But you got to be in the state of mind to execute those moves. It's not enough just to have social skills. You got to be in the right state. It's also not enough just to be in the right state. You got to have social skills. But the social skills rest on the state. You got to be in state and have the right state. I like you without saying it. Right on, right on, right on. I see. Yeah, in social dynamics. Yeah, you want the person to like you without having to say it. I don't know if that's what you're saying, but you got to be in state, inconquerable, invincible, unbreakable, to be able to roll with any punches, to not be caught off guard. That's like part of the readiness I was talking about earlier. To not be caught so surprised. I mean, things may surprise you for a moment, but like reclaim yourself because you're tapped in. Got to be tapped into your presence. That's a lot of what AZD teaches is being in state. And now after so long of him teaching that, he really is not teaching that very much. In the highest level, most advanced classes he teaches, he does a lot with state of mind shifting and how to change your state of mind, especially around very touchy subjects, deep subjects, relationships, mom and dad, money. Like, I'm not offering going so deep and rewiring your whole subconscious mind with this event. But I am offering actual techniques to change your state of mind, to be ready for business, to be ready to step out into the world and be of service, to handle people's communications and be able to process them after the fact so that they don't stick with you and you ruin your sleep and the next morning you're ruined because you didn't process what happened the night before. How to be in state for business, for going out. And going out, my reference comes from going out with AZD. It's not easy to go out with the number one player on earth. Like, he pushes us hard. We got to be in our state of mind. We got to be ready to communicate, sharp, attentive, aware. Like, it's a very thin ice. You can't be sluggish or sloppy when you go out with AZD. And that's where some people might get offended, like he got hard on them or something. Like, it's his life. Like, he makes a living on killing it when we go out socially. Nobody's paying for his infield, but he proves it again and again to the guys that go out with him. Like, 35 guys moved to Vegas just to go out with AZD. So he's always going out with different guys. He's got to prove it night after night after night. You might have an off night. He can't have an off night. You would lose faith in the system, lose faith in the teacher. Like, he hasn't had an off night since I've known him. And I've gone out with him for over 4 years. And lately it's been 6-7 nights a week. Like, the last 2 months it's been that frequent. That's frequent, man. That's a lot of time to spend going out. There's a lot of commuting to and from. Like, he's clearly mastered his state of mind. I just saw him go through this illness, basically a spider bite, that really fucked him up. I mean, he was eating his skin. He had like a horrible fever, nauseous, sweating. They had to give him a whole bunch of medicines and whatever. His state of mind, he was still so in control. He was still, charming with the medical staff. He was still present with, except for when he's like convulsing and throwing up. Like, he's tapped in, man. He's tapped in. Still held down his relationships. A lot of people, a lot of guys, when they get ill and they tell their girl that they're ill or whatever, the girl actually loses attraction. So how to handle your illness in a way that, well, anyway, the tap-in process. Changing your state of mind. It's everything, man. It does have to do with controlling your inner dialogue or imposing your inner dialogue. You may not be able to always change what you're saying to yourself, but you can change what you're saying to yourself. So what do I mean by that? Let me write this down. Okay, so you may not, let's say I'm saying to myself, oh, you're such a loser. You may not be able to change, oh, I'm such a loser, to, oh, I'm such a winner. Maybe you can. But sometimes, like, the internal dialogue is just, like, on its own. It's got its own strength. You got to put something else there, like, I win. I win. You're not necessarily, you still hear the I'm such a loser or whatever statement, but you're imposing I win. You got to be able to impose what you want to say to yourself. You must be able to let go of what you're saying to yourself. You must be able to move your body despite whatever you're saying to yourself. You may be saying to yourself, I'm so tired or I'm so stiff or something, but your alarm just went off, man. It's time to get up. Get up slower if you have to. But being aware of what you're saying to yourself that's freezing your movement. You're paralyzed. You're not going for it because your internal dialogue is halting your movement. Got to get control of that sucker. And that's going to be through awareness. I'm talking to myself or not. Like, I'm feeling good or bad. Okay? You're experiencing some feelings in you. So what are you saying to yourself? It's going to be through having discipline where you're doing an action anyway. You've committed to it. So now you're committed to it. You're going to do it. And then the voice inside starts saying, no, I'm not going to do it. Well, that voice may not have ever come up if you hadn't made the decision to go and do that activity. I'm going to take a cold shower. You go to take the cold shower and a voice comes up, man, I don't want to take a cold shower. Like, or, it's not going to get, it's too warm. I don't know. You start talking to yourself. Well, if you didn't have a cold shower routine, it's like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it. Does it make a sound? So if you have a voice in the head, but you're not doing anything to activate the voice, is it still talking to you? Maybe not. But having discipline, something you have prior decided, I'm going to do this. I'll wake at 7. I'll go to the gym at 10. I'll eat this food tomorrow, today, whatever. I'll read this. Gives your mind an opportunity to object and resist it and observe that resistance. That's you observe that resistance. It's not you. It's a voice in your head controlling your body like puppet strings. And now left arm raises, and now right arm raises. It's literally a dialogue. To take a step, it's left foot, right foot, right foot. That's the dialogue. It's just so quiet and subtle that you don't notice you're dialoguing with yourself. But that's how your body moves. You're talking to yourself. So change your state of mind because your mood, like AZD says, your mood is like a room in a house. And when you're in a similar mood or state of mind, you'll access memories and other information that you learned in that state of mind. So if you're a particular kind of happy, you're like super happy. Later, when you're sad, you may forget what you learned when you were happy. But when you're happy again, you'll remember all these things that you learned when you were happy. Similar, like if you're depressed and you're watching something, later when you're not depressed, you don't even remember what that movie was about. But if you're ever depressed again, you may remember that movie and the details. Because the internal state of mind is a frequency. And when you change frequencies, you no longer hear the lower frequencies. But if you go back to that frequency, that state of being, you'll remember a lot of things that resonate with that state of mind. Being able to change your state of mind, get in a higher vibrational state where you're more ready to communicate, more responsive, more present with what you're doing and what other people are doing. And what it really means, because when you tap your survival energy, you see aggressive body language when psychologically you may not see it. If somebody asks you, is that person being aggressive? You may not see it with your brain, your mind. But if you tap in with your body, it may be obvious that person's being aggressive. Your mind and heart are at odds with each other. And tapping in is a connection. Tapping in is the process of imagination, movement, sound, voice, to change your state of mind. And sometimes you'll need to be able to do it when you're out, because something out in the world will affect you. And you got to be a master of changing your state of mind. Otherwise, you're about to destroy your social experience. You got to change your state of mind if you get offended by something. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. All right? Okay, everybody. That's my spiel on the process. A lecture I'll be giving in 2 days' time, on Tuesday, 48 hours from now. I'll be talking shortcut techniques about the process that tap you into your social intuition and your survival energy, your survival value. Also, AZD, I'll be questioning for about 20 minutes, getting his take on some things that will push my process further, as well as your own, of course. Your process, how to process the data of your life, to process your night and your sleep, to process the interactions of your day, and to get yourself, change your state of mind and get yourself into a state of mind that's ready to socialize with the top on the planet, AZD. That's what I'll be teaching and showing. And I hope you guys sign up. It's $77. DM me if you're interested. It's in 2 days. You get the recording forever. And I'll see you on the next stream. Jay Guru Dev. Os. Praise the Lord.